The velvet drapes hang like funeral shrouds, their folds so heavy they sag under the weight of centuries, swallowing the walls and suffocating fabric. Incense curls in the air in pale spirals, sweet at first, then sickly, clinging to your tongue like resin. Each breath tastes of ash and roses drowned in their own perfume, a sweetness that rots even as it lingers. The chamber feels alive, pulsing with anticipation, yet it is not a sanctuary, it is a tomb disguised as celebration. You step inside and feel the silence close around you, padded, suffocating as though the walls themselves are pressing in. Shadows cling to the corners like parishioners at confession, too ashamed to meet your eyes, too enthralled to turn away. The floor groans beneath your feet, every board creaking like bones splintering under the strain of unseen hands. You feel the weight of history pressing down, ancient and unrelenting. She sits before you, her figure trembling even in stillness. Lucrezia, child, bride, hostage, draped in white too luminous for this dim chamber. Her skin is pale as wax, her lips painted with trembling rouge that quivers at the edges. She does not lift her gaze. She does not need to. Already her body is not her own. Already it has been promised, traded, and signed away in secret ledgers and whispered oaths. She is here to perform a ritual written by men who will never step inside this room. The whispers of incest cling to her like invisible stains, refusing to wash away, insinuations carved into her flesh by gossiping mouths. She has been made myth before she has been made woman. And you, silent witness, can only watch as the door slams shut behind her, the iron bolt sliding with the sound of final judgment. It lands in your chest like a stone. The chamber is sealed, and with it her fate. The bolt is not protection. It is burial. The roses try to speak against the silence, but their perfume has turned rancid, a sweetness that mocks. Their petals are not gifts but trophies, bloodied silk torn from some earlier conquest. They crawl into your nostrils until you gag on their beauty. The air grows hotter, thicker, pressing into your lungs like smoke. You want to escape, but there is no escape. This chamber is not a room but an altar, and she is already bound upon it. The bed waits with the hunger of an idol. Silk sheets glow in the candlelight, white too pure to remain unstained. They do not invite rest but promise evidence. Evidence of her body's surrender, evidence of her family's pact. The bed is not soft, it is sharpened by expectation. The wood seems to hum, gold carvings catching the light like teeth ready to bite. Every detail screams that this night is not hers, not his, but theirs. Theirs to claim, to record, to weaponize. You feel the eyes of the absent pressing against the walls. Fathers bargaining their daughters, priests whispering of sin while orchestrating it, a pope with ink-stained hands guiding bodies as though they were pawns on a board. They are not here, but they are here. Their will thickens the air. Their presence rides every flicker of candlelight. Lucrezia is not a bride. She is parchment, a body upon which dynasties scrawl their desperate signatures. And you realize you are not watching a wedding night, you are watching a contract bleed itself into flesh. Her breath betrays her. It comes shallow, rhythmic, too precise. She is rehearsing, performing even now, as though she can convince herself that this is choice, that her silence is agency, that her trembling is not fear but devotion. Yet the silence between you grows heavier, unbearable, until it becomes a living thing crawling along your spine. Every sigh, every shift of her gown, will become gossip by dawn. Her body is not her own. Her body is evidence, and the witnesses are legion though invisible. The chamber itself groans in its stillness. Curtains ripple without wind. Candles bow as though gasping for air. The shadows crowd closer, greedy to swallow the girl in the chair. She waits, unmoving as inevitability swallows her whole. A bride dressed as a queen reduced to flesh, flesh reduced to currency. You want to turn away to flee, but there is nowhere to go. The walls close tighter, the tomb seals, and dread piles upon your chest until your ribs ache with its weight. And then the night begins, not with tenderness, not with ceremony, but with silence sharp enough to gnaw bone. It is a silence that mocks you, that gnaws the edges of your sanity, daring you to breathe louder than you should. You know what is coming. You feel it moving closer, merciless and cold, politics dressed as passion, lust armored in duty. And in that final pause before the plunge, you understand. Humiliation has only just begun, and dread is sharpening itself into violence. The candles burn lower, their wax spilling like blood pooling beneath a wound, every drip a heartbeat marking the passage of a night that refuses to end. Shadows crawl across the walls like voyeurs, long and twisted, their shapes shifting into grotesque figures that lean forward, eager to consume what unfolds. The air grows hotter, thicker, pressed down with the stink of sweat, incense, and roses beginning to rot. You hear the rasp of fabric, silk brushing against skin, and the sound echoes louder than it should, as though the chamber itself has leaned in to listen. This is not love, not passion, not desire. This is a ritual staged for power, a performance wrapped in ceremony, its violence disguised by candles and lace. The first act begins. It is both brutal and mechanical, like gears grinding against one another. There is no tenderness here, only the necessity of proof, the demand that flesh must speak louder than vows. Every movement becomes evidence, every shudder becomes record. You feel the sheets beneath you dampen, sticking to your back like wet parchment desperate to preserve the ink of sweat and stain. The bed itself seems to sigh under the weight of expectation, its frame groaning with each thrust, as if weary of how often it has been asked to hold the collapse of women into symbols. Her silence is the loudest thing in the room. It presses against your skull, ringing in your ears until it becomes unbearable. She does not cry, does not scream, but the absence of her voice is itself a scream stretched across centuries. That silence will outlive her body. It will linger in rumors, in sermons, in whispers across Europe. Even now, you sense how history sharpens its knives on her quiet obedience, mistaking endurance for complicity, mistaking suffering for devotion. You want her to speak, to shatter the performance, but she has been trained too well. Silence is safer than refusal. Silence is survival. The horror is not only in the act, but in the audience that does not need to be present to see. Even in the dark, the Vatican watches. The walls here have ears, mouths, and parchment waiting to record. What happens between two bodies is immediately multiplied into countless eyes. Confessors, clerics, rivals, gossips. This bed is not private. It never was. It is a stage where two actors are forced to play roles written long before they were born, while the world holds its breath for the reviews. And she knows, even as her body trembles beneath him, that she is no longer flesh but ledger, her every bruise calculated into politics. The Borgia name presses itself into her thighs, heavier than any touch. Each thrust carves deeper into her identity, etching her not as daughter, not as woman, but as vessel for a dynasty starving for permanence. Bloodlines are written with semen and sweat, with the agony of brides broken before dawn. And yet the chroniclers will call it celebration, sanctification, the natural order of alliance. They will not smell the iron tang in the air, the bruises darkening beneath pale skin, the way her lips are bitten until they bleed. They will not record the choking perfume of roses trying and failing to disguise the stench of fear. They will only write that the marriage was consummated, success, duty fulfilled. The sheets grow heavier with their dampness, clinging like burial shrouds. You feel the fibers knotting around you, binding you to the mattress as though the chamber itself conspires to trap you here. Her hair spreads across the pillow like a halo drowned in sweat, strands plastered against her cheeks, sticking as though even her own body wishes to bind her mouth shut. He moves, she yields, and the rhythm becomes unbearable in its predictability, the metronome of power pounding into her without pause. There is no climax, no intimacy, only the moment when it is decided that the performance is sufficient. He withdraws not in tenderness but in triumph, as though conquest has been achieved, as though her body is a land successfully occupied. She lies still, eyes open but unfocused, her chest rising in shallow gasps that are neither relief nor release. The silence deepens once again, heavier now, thick as lead. You realize that this is not the end of her night, it is only the first act. And in that thought lies the true terror. Because even as her body aches, even as humiliation clings like a second skin, the night is not finished. The ritual demands repetition, proof not once but thrice. She knows it, and you feel it radiating from her trembling form. The dread of having to rise again, to open again, to collapse again. The nightmare does not end with this silence. It only resets, darker, heavier, more consuming. And as you watch her shiver in the candlelight, you understand. This night will not leave her alive in spirit, only alive enough to serve again. The room has not cooled. The air is still swollen with the stink of roses, sweat, and candle smoke, a suffocating fog that clings to your throat. The sheets are still damp, plastered to the mattress like a second skin, yet she is summoned again. No pause, no reprieve, only the grinding wheel of expectation turning once more. Flesh is treated like steel, malleable, reforged through the hammer of repetition. She does not walk willingly, she is dragged by silence, compelled by the invisible rope of dynasty, pulled back into the altar of her own undoing. Desire here is not human. It is gluttony in silk, a hunger wearing a crown, an appetite too large for a single night to contain. He leans in with breath reeking of wine, his lips swollen and purple from excess, a mouth that knows only consumption. Sweat runs down his temple, thick and salty, dripping onto her like baptism in filth. His hands claw not with tenderness but with desperation, as if tearing her open again and again might stamp legitimacy into her flesh. He does not seek her. He seeks proof, proof of virility, proof of dominance, proof that the Borgia name deserves to be etched into history's stone. The second act begins with more weight, more cruelty. The rhythm is harsher, less rehearsed, more savage, as though the mask of ceremony has already been discarded. The candles burn lower, their flames shaking as though shivering in shame. Shadows writhe on the walls like a congregation of demons clapping in obscene delight. The air fills with the sound of impact, skin striking skin, bed groaning beneath their weight. The sound is not music but machinery, the grinding of gears, the relentless pounding of power asserting itself through flesh. You can taste it in the air, salt, wine, fear, a mixture that coats the back of your tongue until you gag. Her body does not resist, it collapses. Resistance is futile, and collapse is the only form of rebellion left to her. Her breath comes ragged, shallow, forced from her lungs in little bursts that sound like whimpers though no words escape. Her hair tangles across her face, strands sticking to her wet skin like blackened vines binding her head. Each thrust tightens the invisible chains around her, shackling her more firmly to her name. She is not woman here. She is object, jewel, symbol, her suffering transformed into the currency of alliance. The harder he drives, the tighter history binds her, and the tighter history binds her, the more her humanity dissolves into dust. There is no intimacy. Intimacy would require recognition of selfhood, and her selfhood has already been consumed. What remains is grotesque spectacle, flesh reduced to theater. Even the sheets, stained and crumpled, seem to mock her, whispering that they will outlive her. They will be washed, folded, reused, while her body bears scars invisible and permanent. You feel the room vibrating with this obscene performance, as though every beam and brick is being forced to witness. The air itself recoils yet cannot flee. The cruelty lies not just in the repetition, but in its inevitability. This is not a mistake, not an accident. It is deliberate, calculated, demanded. She must be broken not once but thrice, so no doubt can cling to the legitimacy of the union. Each act is another nail hammered into her coffin, another brick stacked on the wall of her cage. And still the world outside will call it triumph. The whispers in Rome will say, 3 times in a single night. Proof of passion, proof of strength, proof of destiny. But here in this chamber you see it for what it is, mutilation dressed as celebration. Her eyes flutter open only once, and in that brief flicker you see it, the plea not for rescue but for ending. She no longer prays for deliverance, only for silence, for sleep, for a void deeper than the sheets that smother her. Her lips part as though to speak, but only air escapes, hot and trembling. She falls limp for a moment and he shakes her, pulls her back, forces her into rhythm once more. Even collapse is not permitted. Exhaustion itself becomes weapon and curse. She must endure long enough to be broken again. And so the second act closes not with release but with ruin. Her body is left trembling, spasming under the weight of conquest. He withdraws like a beast sated for now but never satisfied, and she lies there, gasping in silence, waiting for the summons to rise once more. You feel dread collapse into numbness, and numbness is worse because numbness means the night is not yet over. 2 acts complete. 1 more to come. The horror waits like a blade still unsheathed. By the time the 3rd act begins, the body is no longer flesh but battlefield. What once was soft and trembling with dread has hardened into a wasteland, every nerve frayed, every vein trembling like a drum beaten too long. Muscles spasm not from desire but from collapse, twitching like soldiers breaking rank, surrendering the field. Her skin, damp with sweat and tears, feels colder now as though the warmth of humanity has already left it. Each gasp drags through her chest like a blade scraping bone. The bed beneath her has become a grave and she lies in it alive, punished by duty, punished by name. Tears streak down her cheeks, but even the tears feel mechanical, no longer born of resistance but of the body's last reflexes. They fall into the perfume-thick sheets, mixing with the scent of roses until the air itself tastes of iron and flowers, blood and bloom, agony and beauty, grotesquely tangled. You swallow the atmosphere like poison. It burns the back of your throat. Candles hiss as their wax drips onto stone, each drop like a clock ticking down toward dawn, a cruel reminder that the night is still not finished. He returns again, his shadow heavier now, movements slower but no less ravenous. His hunger is not dulled by repetition. It is sharpened, whetted, as though he has grown more desperate to prove what has already been proven. Desire is gone. What remains is compulsion, the grotesque theater of dynasty devouring itself. His hands grip tighter, not out of passion, but to squeeze the last ounce of proof from her quivering frame. He sees not her collapse, only the ledger of history demanding that this third act be written. She collapses inward. Her limbs obey no command, not even his. They twitch, they tremble, but they do not resist. She has become corpse animated by duty, a shell dragged through motion by the invisible marionette strings of expectation. Her silence has deepened. It is no longer the silence of fear but of vacancy. She is gone, and only her body remains, trembling beneath the weight of a family's hunger. Her eyes glaze over as though searching for a void to vanish into, a darkness deeper than night itself. Outside these walls, dynasties gnash their teeth. They crave heirs the way wolves crave blood, not caring whose body is torn open to deliver them. Every movement of this third act is not between two bodies but between empires, kingdoms, alliances. Her pain is their parchment, her exhaustion is their ink. With each thrust, she is reduced further, hollowed out, until she is nothing more than performance. No flesh, no spirit, only spectacle. The witnesses may not be in the room, but the Vatican watches through rumor, Rome listens through walls, and history sharpens its quills. The act is never private. It is devoured alive by those who were never here. The grotesque horror now transcends the physical. Her exhaustion is not simply a body pushed past its limit. It is the realization that her suffering will be paraded, exaggerated, whispered as legend. They will not remember her pain, they will remember the scandal. 3 times in a single night they will say with smirks and raised brows, proof of fertility, proof of union, proof of destiny. They will turn her into a story before dawn, her humiliation feeding their laughter, their envy, their politics. She has been stripped not only of her strength but of her right to silence. Even collapse becomes public property. You feel the weight of history pressing against her chest, heavier than any body above her. History does not lie with her, it consumes her. It gnaws on her flesh like carrion birds tearing open a carcass, leaving only scraps to be remembered. She is devoured alive, not by passion, not even by cruelty, but by time itself, by the endless hunger of names and crowns. This is not consummation. It is cannibalism, her body the feast upon which dynasties gorge. When it ends, there is no end. She lies trembling, breath shallow, heartbeat erratic, but the night itself feels eternal. The sheets are soaked, the candles are nearly dead, yet the silence that follows is louder than any cry. The silence says it is done. The silence says she is gone. Her humiliation has calcified into numbness, her humanity dissolved into legend before dawn. She has been consumed thrice, not only by flesh but by history, and history does not return what it eats. Somewhere beyond the bolted door, servants wait, ears pressed to wood, already preparing the whispers that will spread like wildfire. By the time the sun rises, this night will not belong to her, it will belong to rumor, it will belong to power. And so the third act bleeds into the world outside, where scandal becomes weapon, where gossip becomes currency, and where the echoes of this bed will shape the politics of Rome. Dawn rises not with birdsong but with whispers. The first light crawls across Rome not as blessing but as exposure, pulling the night's obscenity out of shadows and into mouths eager to feed. Servants murmur before their masters, their voices low but eager, carrying fragments of truth sharpened into knives. 3 times they say. 3 times the bed was broken, the sheets turned battlefield, the body consumed like ritual sacrifice. It is not spoken as tragedy but as proof, proof of virility, proof of obligation, proof of corruption. Whispers scurry faster than rats through alleys, climbing from kitchens to corridors, from corridors to courts, until even the Vatican listens with an ear pressed to rumor. You feel it in the air, not relief, not closure, but contagion. The scandal spreads like plague, infecting everything it touches. Her name, once cloaked in bridal white, now drips with insinuation. Was she pure? Was she spoiled before the vows were inked? Was she victim or accomplice or something worse, a whore anointed by holy vows? The questions are not asked in compassion but in hunger, as though her suffering is meat to be torn and tasted. She becomes less than herself, dissected not by surgeons but by gossips, every part of her body turned into an argument, every gasp into evidence, every silence into confession. Courtiers sharpen their tongues into daggers. Each retelling grows bloodier, more lurid. Some claim she screamed, some that she was silent, some that she welcomed it with wicked pride. Truth dissolves in wine and laughter, replaced by invention more grotesque than reality. In candlelit chambers, diplomats scribble notes that will travel across kingdoms, each inked word feeding rivalries. France will hear of it. Spain will sneer at it. The Borgia name, already soaked in suspicion, now glistens with scandal as though drenched in oil, ready for the spark that will ignite it into infamy. The horror now is not in the room where her body broke, but outside it, in the mouths of those who will never see her, yet will speak of her forever. Flesh has become story. Story becomes weapon. The politics of Rome thrive not on victories or treaties but on whispers. And here, one night, one forced performance written in sweat and silence, becomes a currency of power. The Pope's enemies wield it as proof of corruption. His allies twist it into proof of fertility. And Lucrezia herself is nowhere in this discourse. She has been erased, overwritten by narrative, transformed into symbol before the blood has even dried. Her body is not hers. Her story is not hers. She is a specimen laid on a table, surrounded by scholars of deceit. They debate her as though she were parchment, as though every tear and bruise were ink. The cruelty is not only that she endured it, but that she cannot contain it. It spills out of her chamber, infecting streets and palaces, until strangers own pieces of her more than she does herself. The horror is external now. History has begun its autopsy while she still breathes. You taste bile as the day unfolds. Rome is alive with scandal, its markets buzzing, its corridors humming, its taverns drunk on rumor. 3 times they repeat with smirks and raised brows. 3 times like a chant, like a curse, like a carnival song. It echoes louder than bells, stronger than prayer. Even the sanctity of the church is mocked in the telling, for how can holiness survive when its house breeds such filth? The very institution meant to bless her has instead sold her body as theater. And you begin to see the deeper cruelty. This night is no longer hers alone. It has been stolen, bartered, weaponized. Centuries will pass and still they will whisper. Scholars will argue whether she was innocent or complicit, whether she was puppet or seductress. Plays will be written. Paintings will hint. Stories will circle. And in every retelling her voice will be absent. The scandal outlives the scream, outlives the silence, outlives the truth. This is the alchemy of power. Flesh to rumor, rumor to weapon, weapon to history. What began in velvet and roses now corrodes in ink and laughter. The claustrophobic dread of the chamber bleeds outward, infecting the whole world with its sickness. She is both present and erased, both central and absent, both bride and corpse. A body devoured, now a name consumed. And as dusk threatens to fall again, the whispers do not die but deepen, seeping into centuries. The night has not ended, it has multiplied, echoing through time. What happened in that chamber is no longer bound by walls. It belongs to eternity, to scandal, to history's hunger. And so the story bends, leading not to release but to reflection, where silence itself must be confronted. History remembers Lucrezia not as a girl, not as a bride, but as a rumor lacquered in rouge, lips painted by centuries of gossip. Her body, once trembling beneath the velvet canopy, becomes flattened into parchment, dissected by scholars and enemies alike. The three consummations calcify into legend, repeated in whispers, sermons, and scandalous tales. Each retelling is another hand pressing her deeper into the grave, her breath stolen not only by the acts of that night but by the endless afterlives of rumor. You stand in the ruins of her night, hearing echoes of silk tearing, bones trembling, and realize she was both victim and weapon, cursed by her family's hunger for dominion. She is both wound and banner, sacrificed on an altar she never built. Her body was temple and offering, her cries absorbed by marble halls that never gave them back. She bled into silence, and silence was reshaped into spectacle. Even exhaustion became inscription, her suffering written in invisible ink, deciphered only by those who hungered to exploit it. You feel it even now, the way her story coils like barbed wire around the throat of memory, tightening chains that whisper one truth. Power is built not only on conquest but on flesh, and flesh is the most fragile foundation of all. The scandal was never hers to own. It belonged to the mouths of courtiers, the pens of chroniclers, the politics of kingdoms. Men wielded her body as banner, enemies sharpened her name into dagger, allies polished her humiliation into emblem of glory. She is remembered less as Lucrezia, daughter, sister, bride, and more as the bride thrice used. A title carved into her marrow by strangers, engraved upon her silence. You begin to see the grotesque theater for what it is, not simply a wedding night, but a stage upon which an empire fed its hunger. The crime is not only in what was done, but in how it was remembered. A child's bed transformed into altar. Sheets soaked in humiliation presented as proof of legitimacy. Flesh transfigured into parchment upon which history scribbled its lies. Her cries devoured not by ears but by time itself. The machinery of dynasty consumes truth, preferring spectacle, preferring scandal, preferring the myth that can travel further than the body it erases. And so she vanishes, not in the moment her body gave way, but in centuries of laughter, rumor, and judgment that reduced her to symbol. And here, in this final silence, you realize the nightmare never ended. It simply changed shape. Her voice is gone, yet her story remains, mutilated and paraded, dressed in disguises she never chose. The horror is not confined to her. She is only one of countless women devoured by history, their screams rewritten into hymns of dynasty, their broken bodies embalmed in myth. Behind gilded portraits, behind courtly romances, behind chronicles written in Latin, the faint echo of a child's sob persists, inaudible to those who worship crowns. You ask yourself, how many more beds became altars? How many more brides collapsed beneath crowns disguised as husbands? How many more nights were rewritten into legends that praised dynasty while erasing the girl who bled beneath it? How many times has history mistaken collapse for devotion, silence for consent, humiliation for honor? The silence does not answer. It presses heavier, like stone, like a tomb sealed shut, crushing beneath its immensity every question that dares to rise. The nightmare ends not with release but with a void. No bird song, no laughter, no absolution. Only silence, immense and crushing, as though the world itself mourns what it can never restore. A silence thicker than stone walls, heavier than crowns, darker than centuries. And within that silence lingers the truth no historian will ever fully record, that behind every dynasty carved in marble lies the echo of a girl's scream, swallowed, misremembered, mistaken for the music of power. And so the screen fades to black, but the silence remains, crawling into your chest like smoke. You feel her absence more than her presence. the hollowness left behind by a life consumed and rewritten. The scandal was not hers, it was history's crime, the eternal appetite of power feeding on the flesh of the innocent. And the silence asks you, though it never answers, how many more will vanish the same way? How many more names will dissolve into rumor, their humanity devoured, their screams buried beneath the hymns of empire?